business going on as well.
Cool.
So, Ulysses, are you going to tell us when we're on? You are live. Great. Thank you very much. So welcome, everyone. This is Jay Schenirer, City Council member from District 5. We're here for our weekly chat and trying to keep everybody updated on what's going on in the city, how we're responding to COVID-19, and what we can do. We have the ability to take questions. So if you're there and watching us live and you ask a question, please go ahead and send it in, and we'll see what we can do to answer it. I'm here today with Blake Young. Blake is the president and CEO of Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services, which is just a great institution and an organization that has done so much to help us respond to the COVID and really helping out individuals across the city and across the county. What I'm going to do is just take a few minutes before we get started with Blake to talk about what the council did last night. If you've been watching, you know that we had passed a budget a few weeks ago, which was basically a bare bones budget, but that we also, in addition to that, have received $89 million from the federal government with guidance about what we can and can't do about it in response to COVID. We've spent a lot of time talking about it. We have had a 4.5-hour council meeting last night where we did an initial round of conceptual expenditures, and conceptual because a lot of it still needs to be fleshed out and come back. But I just want to give you a little bit of an update on what those were. The biggest category for the expenditures, and we spent about $28 million or purposed $28 million last night. 11 million of that is to help small businesses. That's about jobs. That's about getting people the resources so that they can buy food, feed their families, pay their rent, all of that. So $11 million went to small business. We put $2 million aside for a partnership with school districts where we want to run a 5 to 6 week summer program that is social emotional learning, academics, the arts, mental health awareness, and somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 young people. Starting in mid-July and going through August. And we'll be working with the school districts to flesh that out as well. We put $1 million towards farm to fork alfresco dining. We really want to help our restaurants, and this is a way that they can really get over some regulations and put tables out on the sidewalk or even in parking lots where people can socially distance and go out for a meal. We did money for domestic violence interventions. This has been a huge piece. We put $2 million into it. We know that domestic violence has increased exponentially since COVID. More people without jobs, staying home. It's really a sad thing, but we know it's gone up, I think, month to month from last year by 120% or 160% increase. So quite a bit. And so we really want to put some funds there. We are doing some stuff to clean up the homeless encampments that we have. We put $1 million into that. The zoo got some money, Fairy Tale Town, some others. So really trying to make sure that we're spreading it around so that we can help as many people as we can to overcome the hardships that they're facing because of COVID. This will come back to the council in 2 weeks for a final. We still have about $61 million that we need to spend before the end of the year. We'll be talking to folks as we go. There's a survey that will go out from the city council in the city about what people need most. And we know that there are many more things that we need to do around the arts organizations, around feeding people and food, which gets us to our guest. So Blake, thank you for being here today. Thank you for everything you're doing. Maybe what we could do is start with a quick rundown of what is Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services. I know you're about a lot more than food.
You bet, Jay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services is a multi-service organization, if you will. But our primary responsibility and what we're known for is feeding people. So we are a regional food bank. And so that may be foreign to a lot of people in this area because it came to be not too long ago. If you were in Chicago, Illinois, if you were in LA, if you were in Shreveport, even Louisiana, you would have a regional food bank. And what the primary responsibility of a regional food bank is really to source and distribute food to all of the agencies in the county in order for them to have food to give to the end user, the client. So in essence, we are considered a food hub. And so there's 220 agencies throughout Sacramento County that feed folks, whether it's a homeless shelter, whether it's a women and children shelter, whether it's a food pantry, you call them food lockers, community centers, some school programs. There's 220 agencies throughout the county. And again, our primary responsibility is to act as the wholesaler. So go out and source, buy, get donated food. And then we have contracts with these agencies to ensure that they're able to distribute the food in a safe manner. Because there's 215,000 food insecure people in Sacramento County. In fact, Sacramento County is higher than the state and national average, ironically, as we are farm to fork. We maintain our own direct client distribution programs because there's a gap. So 220 agencies with Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services. Pre-COVID, we help about 150,000 people a month, again, pre-COVID. So there's 215,000 people that are food insecure. We're feeding 150,000 people. So Sacramento Food Bank maintains its own direct distributions where we go out into the community. We have 14 places throughout the county that we provide mobile services, predominantly fresh produce and other shelf-stable food items for families that either aren't getting enough food from the network or that don't have access to the network because of where they live. And SAC Food Bank tries to place these distributions in places where folks can get access to it. What makes us unique, so there's 212 regional food banks throughout the country approximately. And again, these are regional in nature. So the food bank is the hub. The agencies, if you will, Orangevale, River City, Elk Grove, all the churches, et cetera, are what we consider pantries or food programs. But again, there's 220 regional food banks. What makes us unique, and Sacramento should be proud of this, is that 98% of food banks don't have a family services component. And Jay, our council member, knows very well that's what makes us unique, and that's what a lot of people know us. They know we feed folks, but we have all these complementary services. So we provide adult education, children education. We actually have play care or daycare activities for folks that don't have daycare, but that want to take advantage of our programs. We have other nutrition programs. We have a clothing program. We provide services to refugees and immigrants. So we have an immigration legal services, quite robust. Part of the reason we have these, and again, very different than regular food banks, is that we started as an agency. So Father Madigan in 1976 started feeding people, but then saw other opportunities that they needed other help. And this is just how we grew as an agency. And then in 2014, we had an opportunity to take over, if you will, acquire Senior Gleaners, who was the county food bank at the time. And then we were able to grow it from there. So today, our organization is more than tripled the size, and obviously our responsibility is county-wide. So we try to obviously focus on our food programming because those are basic needs, but then our family services program really complements it and tries to move people towards self-sufficiency.
No, it's great. You've certainly come a long way since the days of Father Dan Madigan in the basement of Immaculate Conception Church where he started this.
You bet.
So why don't, and we'll come back to this again, but if I want to know where I can go pick up food because I need food, is there a number to call? Is there an email I should call? And we'll repeat this at the end as well.
You bet, Jay. So there's several platforms that you can access food. So most importantly, the largest provider of food is our agencies. And if it wasn't for our agencies and our partnerships with agencies, we wouldn't be able to get food out there. So if you go to our website, sacramentofoodbank.org, you're going to click on what's called a food finder and just literally type in your zip code. and up comes what will populate is all the agencies that provide food in your area. And so you don't have to stay in your area per se, but we know most people have transportation challenges, et cetera. We have a lot of seniors that still come. They're not, even though they're supposed to be isolated, seniors still need food. They're coming out. Transportation, again, could be a challenge. So website, Food Finder, and what you'll find is all the emergency response agencies where people can go. Obviously, you can call our main line and we'll get you to where you need to go. Also, 211 has all this information as well, but it's just really easy to go to our website. And if you're in need of our services, please don't be embarrassed and find food. If you're in need of educational resources, there's a robust website for that as well. And then again, if you're in need of immigration services or refugee services, we have a very robust website that can help you out there.
Great. You guys have certainly become, you have been and remain an institution in Oak Park as well.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about how the food bank has responded to the crisis that we're in and what's changed for you?
You bet. Well, I think two things stand out, Jay, and then I'll kind of get into what our response was. One is, and you've certainly helped with this, just all the new connections that we've had or partnerships that we've formed as a response to this. Like, we didn't work heavily with the school districts. They do such wonderful work, but it just wasn't necessarily in our wheelhouse. We do provide food to some small school districts, and we do some individual programming, but it's just been an amazing partnership. And, I've actually learned a lot and have tons of respect for the school districts and how they serve children and their families. So we've been honored to be able to help with that. You certainly helped facilitate that. The other thing that really comes to mind is how many new people that have never needed our services or food services in general. And I can tell you this, not sitting as an executive at the food bank, because our folks are on the front lines and we get to talk to people all the time. And folks out there that are watching this, it is amazing how many people have never, ever accessed food resources before, are scared to death, they're embarrassed, they don't know what to do, and they're coming to us and our agencies, really not knowing what to expect or what to do. And it's just, that's been very gratifying, but it's also been a very good opportunity for us to shine and to help these folks. So our response to COVID, the runway had to be really short for us to ramp up. And we were really blessed in two things. One, the response from the community in terms of, I want to help volunteer, I want to, provide financial resources, was great. But what happened is most of our volunteers in every one of our programs, and probably throughout the county and country, are senior citizens. And when COVID hit, we asked them, the vulnerable population, to stay home. So our volunteer numbers went down very quickly, as did most people's. But then what happened is once the stay at home or shelter in place happened, I think people realized that volunteering for a food program, whether it was ours or someone else's, is an acceptable activity. So actually the volunteer numbers started to come up again. However, because we're responsible for the entire county in providing food to 220 agencies, we had to ramp up really quickly. So we were blessed enough to get the National Guard. And people ask, why did you get the National Guard? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One, we had a decline in numbers because most of our volunteers are seniors. But secondly, I had to make a decision to minimize exposure of our own employees, because if we went down, there would be a hard, that's where the chain, if you will, the supply chain would be broke. And so National Guard folks were tested, and we could just about guarantee that we were safe. You're never guaranteed, but pretty much guaranteed to be safe, and using the same consistent people in pretty high numbers that were really active on producing a lot of output that we had to do. And something that we normally don't do is pre-box everything. So most of the food that comes in is on pallet quantity, and individual agencies take the pallet quantity or the box quantity back to their own place, and their volunteers assemble it and they give it out. Well, in order to ramp up, we thought pre-boxing it would be an efficient way of doing it. And so the National Guard and the California Conservation Corps helped us, really well there. And as the shelter in place continued, the decision was really solid for us simply because it kept our vulnerable population home. And we knew that if they stayed safe, that eventually when this thing slowed down, we could bring them back to volunteer. However, another thing that happened was out of 220 agencies, over 100 closed the doors, again, because they're senior citizens volunteering, running these food programs. So we had to, at the same time, increase output. We had to do it with less agencies. So our primary goal right away was ramp up our operations, work with the agencies that stayed open to help them build capacity very quickly, and then analyze the food system network and find out where there was areas of Sacramento County that people were having difficulty accessing food because of the closures. And we erected these two, what I call mega distributions, touchless, they're drive-through and walk-up, one at Christian Brothers, one at Encina High School. Those were two areas that the need was very high. And we were able to serve folks in a drive-through fashion, walk-up fashion, 4,000 people in 2 hours. So what our goal was, is to take a little bit of a strain off of the system because our agencies were seeing such massive numbers that they were, even as we were building capacity for them, we couldn't build it quick enough. So these mega distributions took pressure off that. And now with COVID, we're already pivoted, Jay, to post-COVID, and we don't even know when that is, simply because we know that the people that are reliant on our services, whether it's the school district, the mega distributions, or food from all the agencies, are going to be in need for some time. And so that's the thing that we don't know, is how long, but I suspect we've already started planning for until the end of the year. So we know, and here's an example. Pre-COVID, we were serving about 150,000 people a month. I think our numbers came in through April at 280,000. So that's just a massive amount of strain on the agencies to push a lot more food through less, agencies. So what we're doing now is just being really mindful of our inventory and knowing that we don't have a stop date here. But for example, our work with all the school districts and our work with the mega distribution, all the agencies, we're trying to be really mindful of having this supply of food for some time to come. And obviously it's straining our organization because the output is really high, and it's straining the agency because they're just not used to being open this many hours. All of them expanded. They've done just a tremendous job.
Yeah. So let me give a quick shout out to, I know that Mayor and I visited Christian Brothers the first day it was open. I know you had Sacramento police volunteering there. Sacramento sheriffs were volunteering there. Who else did you have as volunteers as far as organizations coming in?
Yeah.
We just want to say thank you to all of those folks.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Sacramento Sheriff's Department. We had the Sac City Police Department, wonderful. We had the National Guard. We had an interesting volunteer group called Team Rubicon, which was they're military veterans that on their off time, they do volunteer work. And we had the California Conservation Corps. And then, we've had folks from your office and other folks coming out. We've tried to minimize just the public at large volunteering because the social distancing and the fact that a lot of our volunteers were seniors. These volunteer groups that you mentioned, Jay, have just been an absolute blessing, and just the camaraderie that has formed. And, we are lucky, the Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services is lucky that because of our turkey distribution, Run to Feed the Hungry, we're used to working with Sac City Police Department and the wonderful folks, but we really never worked with the National Guard or the Sheriff's Department, et cetera. So it's just been a real blessing and a good chance to get to know these great people.
Great. I think people might be interested, Blake, where do you get your food? Where's it
Great question. So most people, there's a misconception, Jay. Most people think all of our food's donated, but if we did, we wouldn't be able to feed the folks that. So most regional food banks, including ours, here's the food breakdown. So the majority of our food comes from farms. So we feed 150,000 people a month which right now is about 30 million pounds of food. A third of that is all produce.
Wait, can you say that 30 million pounds of food per year or per month?
Per year. And a third of that, 34% is, it might be a little higher this year, is all produce. So that comes from every farm in California, almost all California. We get some stuff from Washington, some stuff from Arizona, but the majority of our produce comes from California, and we buy it. And the way we buy it is we buy in a cooperative program with 40 other food banks in California. I'm on the board of the California Association of Food Banks. And so we pool our resources, and sometimes we buy whole farms down in Imperial Valley. Sometimes we buy food from just right here in YOLO, but that's the majority of our food. Then we have roughly 150 to 175 retail outlets. Some of them are grocery stores. Some of them are Sprouts. Some of them, they're all over Sacramento County. And the majority of that food is directly picked up. We assign the agencies that I'm talking about that have the capacity to go pick up that food directly from the grocery store. And then we obviously do a lot of pickups as well. Then we have the United States Department of Agriculture, which is about 20% of our food. Yeah, we call it the TFAP program, the Emergency Food Program, but that's from the federal government. Then we have donation drives, right? Those big kids can. And we have the postal workers. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do that on May 9th. That's the nation's largest food drive. And then we get a lot of food from what I call manufacturers and processors. So it is, it could be Del Monte, for example. It could be Kraft. And then it could be wholesalers like a lot of our produce folks around here, Produce Express, et cetera. That's where our food comes from.
Great. So I know, Blake, you mentioned a little bit, excuse me, about the fact that you didn't really have a relationship with the school districts, but that's changed since then. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you're doing for those families? I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, well, again, and Jay, you are way more knowledgeable about this, but what I do know is there's a tremendous amount of children that qualify for free and reduced meals in Sac City Unified School District. And
I think it's about 70% of the district.
Okay, I was going to say 68. So, I mean, that's a tremendous number. So, I mean, and you and I are on the front lines every day. Probably that's one of the reasons we do what we do. And so because we had to ramp up so quickly and because the school districts were already doing some of this work, what in concert with all of us, including you, it's like, okay, well, if all of these children are going to the schools, what about their families? And we don't know if all of them are accessing the food banks programs or the food agency programs. What about when children come to get a free and reduced meal during COVID? Why not help with food resources for their family? And so that's been an honor to be able to help with that. What I was specifically talking about, other than it's just really, I feel blessed to be able to do that for the kids in the region and their families, is the professionalism and just the good folks that we've worked at the school district and your central kitchen, et cetera. They are just tremendous, and they're so dedicated, and they are amazing people. And so it's just been great. And I hope that we can continue. We've talked about it. The volume's pretty high, but if there's a way that we can create some sort of partnership post-COVID, I would be for that, just simply because the partnership worked really well, and I think both of us have the end result in mind.
Yeah, no, I really also want to give a shout out to the school districts. I know Sac City Unified, I think they were up to over 2 million meals.
Unbelievable.
They have a really high percentage of free and reduced lunch. But what we heard, and I think one of the reasons, Blake, that you got involved, what we heard is that the kids were getting meals, taking them home and feeding their whole families with their free and reduced lunch meal. And what you were able to do is come in and complement that to make sure the families had enough food for the entire family. So I think that's a really important piece of the story that's been told. And again, kudos to Sac City Unified for really ramping up. And I know the other districts have done it as well. Natomas, Twin Rivers, Robla, all of them. So yeah, maybe what you could talk about a little bit is, you said you're starting to plan for post-COVID. I mean, let's hope that comes sooner rather than later. But
yes,
what does that mean for you guys?
Well, I think, our budget is July through June, so we're starting to budget now for next year. And this is a guessing game for me, honestly. But I've had a little experience. You and I were in this work back in the recession in 2008, and I feel like we never recovered. Our numbers just went up, and they stayed there. It was a tremendous increase in the output even back then. Now, I feel that because there's so much marginal employment, there's so many people that already struggle with the cost of housing, food, et cetera, that the demand for our food resources is going to stay where it is for quite some time. I just don't see the ability to recover from this very quickly. So my hope is, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. My hope is that at some point people can, but I'm mindful that you can't take a person with marginal employment and just turn right around and start paying rent, and it's just not going to happen. So we're trying to project, if you will, what does it look like beyond Christmas? But our budget, our food volume, what we're going to spend on trying to nourish the community is going to increase. And so, most food banks around the country don't have a ton of rainy day money. So what has been a blessing, though, is a lot of folks have stepped up, Big Dave Giving, et cetera. And I think they've just found that our mission and what we do is really critical, not just in times of this, but I think we've been pushed to the forefront, not we as Sacramento Food Bank, but the emergency food system network. I think people really value what we're doing. So my hope is that, people continue to support all of us. And, for us, every dollar we produce 5 meals. So that's a tremendous return on investment, return on community investment, if you will. And we're just hoping that the folks that decided during COVID to support our work, that they continue to do so.
So maybe, Blake, just kind of a couple last quick questions. Give us an idea of the size of the organization, how many employees you have, things like that, just so people get an idea of that.
Yeah. So we have a whole family services campus, as Jay knows, down in Oak Park, where we provide the family services, and we have our food bank up off of I-80 in North Sacramento. So combined, we have about 75 to 78 staff. We have 10,000 volunteers per year. As you can see, the majority of work is done by our volunteers. So we would not be the organization we were if it wasn't for all the groups and all the individuals that spend so much time with us.
Great. So tell me once again, if I want to volunteer, if I want to make a donation, what do I do? If I want to be the 10,001st volunteer that you have, what do I need to do to help support this important cause?
Yeah, so our website is very robust. If you're a volunteer, for example, you literally can do everything online, and then when COVID's over, you can come and do an orientation. We do, unless you're with a corporate group or a school group, and it's a one-time volunteer, you are required to come and take an orientation. We want you to know who we are, and we want the relationship to be meaningful. To donate is very simple. Go on our website. That's the easiest. And there's a big red donate button. I would just stress that.
And the website is sacramentofoodbank.org.
Yes,
right?
Thank you. And I would just stress it's pretty simple. A buck feeds 5 meals. That's a great return. And we've been in this business a long time. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you and thank all of the people that support us. And I just think that it's unbelievable in our beautiful town that we're higher than the state national average in food insecurity. And we're going to work. One of the things, probably the last thing I would say, to try to differentiate what a regional food bank does is we're working on hunger relief issues. So we're really looking at the system and trying to make strategic decisions and investments all over the county to ensure that folks that need food have access to it. And then probably CalFresh and working with our leadership in the county and the city to ensure that people can get the CalFresh benefits that they are is really important. And, we say that a well-nourished community is a more productive community. And I think that holds true.
Well, I think, Blake, and you said this in many ways today, if we're going to be the farm to fork capital of the world, we need to make sure that covers everyone. And that that all of our folks in Sacramento get what they need to be successful in their homes and with their families. So I want to say thank you to you for the work you're doing. Thank you to Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services. We wouldn't be here in this time and with so many people getting fed by you. It would be a much different situation without the food bank. And so thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do. It's much appreciated. All right.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks. So that's it for today. Appreciate Blake joining us, and we hope you all have a good week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks again.
Take care.